Hello, this video is just to look at how to set up an if function which will look at a cell or look at some information that you've got, decide if whatever condition we've applied is true or false, and then do the appropriate calculation depending on whether it's true or whether it's false, which may be different calculations. Now what we've got here, we've got closing balances on our cash flow. So the closing balance before interest, this is 1,000 minus 2,000. And in this cell here we want to calculate the interest on that closing balance. And we've got up here in the data, we've got 1% interest, that's 0.01. If it's a debit balance, that means we've got an overdrawn, it's a minus balance. And 0.5%, 0.005, to apply if we've got money in the bank, we'll receive that interest. So we put our formula in here. We want a formula that will calculate the interest and which will look at the closing balance, decide if it's a plus or a minus, and then apply the appropriate rate of interest to it. So we want to use what's called an if function. Press plus or equals for a formula. Go to the insert function there, fx. We want to choose logical. If it's not one of these here, we'll choose logical. And we want to choose if. Press OK to choose if. We get this pull down menu, and this is where we enter the values that we want. Now the logical test, we want to look at this cell, the closing balance, and decide if it's a plus or a minus. So we'll have a test. We need a test that decides one way or the other. So we'll say, what if this cell is less than 1, less than 0? So this cell to be less than 0. So click on this cell, the first closing balance there, and type in a less than sign, which is that one, shift and the less than sign, and 0. So that's our test. Is that cell less than 0? Now what do we do if that's true? Obviously in this case it's not true, but if it was true, what would we do? Well, this is where we enter this one. If it was true that this cell is less than 0, we want to apply the 1%. So we'd multiply the closing balance by 1%. So if it was true that it's less than 0, we take the closing balance, we multiply by the 1% cell. That's what we do if it's true. If it's false, that means it's positive, which in this case it is. If it's false, we want to take the cell and multiply by the 0.5%. So we take the cell times 0.05, which is 0.5%, and that's what we do if it's false. Now we've got all our values in, click OK, and you will see there that because that was a positive closing balance, we've calculated 0.5%. 1% is 10, 0.5% therefore is 5. You can work that out yourselves. Now if I just change this cell, if I change it to a minus 1,000, oh sorry, just a minute, minus 1,000, you can see it's now calculating the appropriate amount, 1%, and it's come up as a minus figure as well because we've got a minus closing balance in the calculation. I'll just put that back to what it was 1,000, and we'll go back to calculating 0.5%. Now the closing balance after interest now, so what we've got now is £1,000, we've earned £5 interest. Our closing balance is add 1,000 plus the £5. We've got 1,005 closing balance, which would, if we were doing a full cash flow, which would become the opening balance in February. Do remember to do that. This one is just set up to show closing balances. Okay, if this is a minus, the same formula will still work. Put the minus in, minus 1,000, and now it's a minus plus a minus, which gives us minus 1,010. If you're overdrawn plus the interest, you'll be even more overdrawn at the end. Put this back to the 1,000. Now we want to put that same formula all the way across. An easy way to do that, just double click on here. To set that formula up to copy, we need to put some dollar signs on certain cells. The B9 is the closing balance. Now as we copy, we want that to change to B10, C9, D9, E9. We want it to change, so don't put any dollars on the B9, but the B2 and the B3, these two cells, we want to always use those because it's always either going to be 1 or 0.5%. So use your F4 to put the dollars. Hopefully you know how to do this by now. And that's the formula set up with dollars on the appropriate cells. Now copy, click on that cell, move into it where it changes, and just drag it across. And now you can see minus 2000, it's calculated 1%, which is 20. Plus 1900, it's calculated 0.5%, and so on. If we let's put 1000 in there just to illustrate it more easily, and it will calculate 5. So the formula all the way across is calculating the appropriate rate of interest depending on whether the closing balance is a plus or a minus. Thank you. That's the end of the video. Bye.